You're listening to The Miller's Wife, a Boat Angel Family Films production. This collection of short stories, written by Brian Stewart and narrated by Alexa Lee, include the short stories The Boat, The Makeover, The Tournament, The Proposal, Maury the Ice Queen, The Buttercups, St. Francis and the Goat, The Last Dog, The Missing Bride, and Cell Block 7. All materials copyright 2020 Boat Angel Family Films. The Boat.
There were 3 to make the journey, sailing from the Calais harbor to Portsmouth. The boat they had was small but sturdy, about 6 meters long, overlapped oak with a strong spruce mast and spruce rudder. The keel was inlaid with lead ingot to give it stability, and it was freshly painted. The ropes were made of quality manila, and the 2 sails of heavy cloth woven by the women from the Mediterranean shores of Morocco. No finer materials were to be found anywhere. They knew the journey would take 4 days, and they had packed well. The mother had knitted woolen sweaters and hats for all, and a bundle of soft white sheepskin blankets had been prepared as well. Her husband was a miller by trade. He had worked in Holland milling grain until they found out that he was Jewish from Bavaria, and had cast him out on both counts, even though his Dutch was impeccable without accent. Unable any longer to provide for his family, he used the last of his savings to purchase the small boat. Having heard that Portsmouth was an area where tradesmen were valued more for their contribution than their heritage, the idea to journey there was birthed. There was nowhere else. The French were not welcoming to strangers either, and they would buy no flour or bring grains from anyone that was not of their blood. It was time to sink or swim. There was no one to see them off. They stocked enough food for the journey, some medicine, dried fruits, and beef jerky. They filled their water barrels with the freshest water they could find after scrubbing the barrels with lime, making sure they were free from the pox or anything that could cause them dysentery and render them unable to man the small vessel. They slept all night next to the beach, and when high tide came at 9 a.m., they cast out. Their daughter was a lively 3 years old, and she had grown up around water. Holland had been a wonderful place to her with her blonde hair. Most thought that she was a native, as they thought her mom with her sharp blue eyes, light complexion, and long braided hair was one of them as well. Unaware of any danger, she could not have been happier with the great adventure. The husband had learned to read the stars and practice continually with a small sextant, mapping out positions and learning as much about navigation and currents as he could. For several weeks, he had taken the boat out by himself each day, teaching himself to raise and lower both the jib and the mainsail. He was still upset and impatient, angry that the Dutch had cast him away. It was an open wound. He was not overly confident, but he had a fire in him to complete the journey. They had a fairly sizable purse, over 200 guilders, equal to an average year's wages. It was enough, he believed, to rent a building and start a new milling outfit when they arrived. They had prayed that morning, holding hands and asking for fair winds and a calm sea. It was balmy for the first 6 hours, and they were quite amused by the overhead seagulls. The distance from the English cliffs of Dover and Calais was less than 50 kilometers, and birds had no trouble making the distance, often gliding for miles. That night he lowered the mainsail, tied it off, and with the winds calm, bid his wife to take her turn in the back, holding the rudder steady. It did not take long to switch positions. He patiently showed her which star to keep at her back. The distance was southwest, and they had picked up a steady wind. She was to hold to position and wake him if she grew weary. He awoke hours later to find the boat was slightly drenched while he had slept under the skins with his young daughter. The rain had poured down, drenching them both. He looked back, saw that his wife was drenched to the bone, with blue lips and shivering. He wondered why she had not awoken him. She had sailed on, reluctant to wake him and disturb his rest. He bailed out the bow as much as he could, doing his best not to wake the child. He motioned for her to release the tiller and get some rest up by the bow under the jib next to their daughter. Hours later, he noticed the dark clouds and the whitecaps pushing the boat about in every direction, as if it were a corked bottle tossed capriciously in the sea. He did his best to find a new heading, but the landmarks so visible earlier had all but disappeared in the gray, murky clouds. Out of the darkened sky came new smells. The taste of electricity permeated his nose. Around him, lightning started crashing, multiple times, multiple hits. He wasn't worried. The boat was made of thick wood lap strap style, and the mast was hardly more than 7 meters high. The sea jostled the rudder out of his hand, and the boom came swinging by him as if pushed by an unseen hand. It smacked into his head, and he struggled but lost his grip. The boat was broadside to the rising sea, being swamped by each oncoming swell. He slumped over, still grasping the rudder, but dazed by the wicked blow to his temple. The small boat tossed him about, and the boom swung powerfully and smacked him again in the other temple. A huge rogue wave poured over the gunwale, soaking his feet and waking his child. Drenched and cold, she started crying, and his wife woke up, her feet soaked through the leather shoes. She saw him slumped over his knees and observed the boat was starboard side to the rising seas, the boom swinging loosely, and they were being tossed further adrift, traveling up and down in the larger troughs, suddenly in grave danger of capsizing. She secured the child around her neck and went back to the stern, avoiding the boom that had torn its long guide rope loose and was acting like a madman with a mallet. With her daughter hanging on dearly, she lost balance and stumbled a few times trying to grab the line, but was able to secure the line and tie it to the port cleat. She pulled her husband off the tiller and drug him to midship and tied him to the front of the mast, using the anchor rope around his armpits to secure him. She wrapped it snugly, making sure it did not chafe his skin. After commanding her daughter to hang on to the rudder of the boat, she began to bail out until the boat was relieved of the heavy and pungent salt water that would have completely swamped their small vessel, sending them to a watery grave. The little boat began to ride higher in the seas, repelling many of the smaller waves, the gunwales having risen another 12 inches above the surface. It was a ceaseless, laborious task, but she was driven to provide safety for her child and did not stop until there was no more water to cup out. She mumbled a prayer for protection, for angels, for the very hand of God to rescue them. And then a shaft light broke through a spot in the clouds, and she was able to detect the white limestone cliffs of England barely visible off their port side. That was the cause for much rejoicing. Her prayer was answered. She realized that they had been pushed slightly north, and the wind was pushing her to the lee side, where she could easily end up on the rocks as there was no harbor or beaches, just rocky cliffs. Although she was not sure where they were in fact outside of Brighton. The cliffs were not those that belonged to Dover, but to the southern shores. They had gained a day, having been pushed by the fast wind across the channel to the south. She was not a navigator of any ilk, but had studied the maps her husband had shown her, and was aware they still had a long way to the protected harbor of Portsmouth, with its deep passage into the safe deep water moorage. She was too far of a distance to see the protective Isle of Wight, which lay to the south of Portsmouth, but she could make out a promontory point, a good day's sail away. She glanced. Her husband was alive, but delirious. Her daughter had awoken and was playing with the simple rag and straw doll that she had made for her for the voyage. She was not in the least bit seasick. Underneath the rudder, they had wrapped a tin of biscuits in oilcloth. They had some dried jerky, which she had broke off for herself. She had fed the little girl a bit of the biscuit and a small spot of cheese. She took a draught of the barley ale from the small flask and gave some to her daughter as well. It would warm them both up a bit. She looked for a place to anchor and rest, but remembered the coast was treacherous with the low tide revealing many rock formations that would make short work of their small wooden hull. The only rope they had for anchorage was wrapped around her husband. From the mast, she heard a bellowing. Her husband was banging his head backward on the spruce spar. She could see that he was drawing blood. She tied the tiller fast and took her cup of draught to soothe him. The look in his eyes was a look of madness. He bellowed at the sight of her and let out a caterwauling that would have woke a church cemetery. She was able to force a few drops between his lips when he sneered at her as if she were a demon apparition. It was unnerving, and immediately her young daughter, seeing her father act thus, had begun her own wailing. The sound was piercing, and she had abandoned the task of ministering to her husband and brought her daughter close to her bosom. Night came swiftly. She lowered the sails and cast out the rock-filled baskets that served as ballasts and slowed the boat down. Although she knew to keep the North Star over her right shoulder, it was of no concern. She needed sleep. She was sure that the current would not take her too far off course. The ballast had slowed them down to less than 3 knots. They weren't going far in the next 8 hours. She believed that the true heaven and throne of God was in the north, where there was a great emptiness stretched over an entrance billions of light years wide. She could not see it with her naked eye, though the sky was clear, but she knew that God lived there and that he heard her prayers. Nowhere else was there an area empty of stars but in the north. Nowhere else was it so colorful as if it were the entrance to a cave wider than the known universe. She had read in the book of Job that God had stretched emptiness over the north. She was sure God was looking down and would bring her safely to shore. She did not know about her husband. It seemed to her that he had gone mad. She grabbed her sleeping child and settled down, eschewing the wet sheepskins, and watched her husband struggle with his bonds. He was like a possessed man. She knew he had rejected the Jewish God of his youth, and he had not much use for her staunch Dutch Reformed beliefs. She resigned herself with the thought that he was like a man cast aside. He was adrift without God in a sea of personally generated hopelessness. She reasoned also that perhaps he had swallowed a great deal of salt water in addition to suffering certain brain injury. She called out to the Lord to send her guardian angels for help and protection. A yellow stain formed around her sitting husband. His kidneys and bladder could not process the salt and had drained the cells of much water and emptied themselves trying to discharge the poison. The boat became pungent with the smell of bitter urine. She had lived on a sheep farm when she was younger, so it was not upsetting to her olfactory glands. What was upsetting, she could not force him to drink even a cup of fresh water, and he was drifting away down a tunnel in which there was no light, only utter darkness. That night she put the child down and went over to the shaking figure of her husband. She wiped his brow with a piece of linen and silently prayed for him. She put her hand on his forehead and felt him burning with fever. She mopped his forehead again and again, hoping that some of the fresh water would enter between his lips, that she could somehow miraculously bring back his sanity. She finally left him alone. As the sun came up, her daughter was coughing. Some phlegm had gotten in her throat and she was having trouble breathing. She placed their daughter over her knees and lovingly tapped on her back. She had brought a small mixture of elderberries and honey in a small wax-covered jar and gave her several spoonfuls, hoping the worst of the coughing spell was over. Her daughter, exhausted but comfortable, fell immediately to sleep. She fell asleep as well. When she awoke at sunrise, the land was much closer. The cliffs had grown larger, looming up on the north. She could smell the grass. She raised the mainsail to its full height, looking at the small flag on the mast indicating where the wind was coming from. She decided to tack leeward and draw even closer to shore. Her woolen sweater was sodden with the salty rain. It was warming up a bit, so she took it off and laid it out to dry. It was delightful experiencing the fresh air coursing over her chest, arms, and back, drying her off. The wind was steady coming from the northeast and pushing them close to 10 knots, a tremendous speed for such a small vessel. Bright sun was rising overhead and time seemed to stand still. The ocean seemed soundless. She was nearly lulled into a trance and then noticed her husband had loosened himself from the mast. He was thrashing about like an escaped animal bellowing. Their daughter started crying, infuriating him even more as he looked back at her. He got up to move about, but weakened and disoriented, he fell on the water barrel, knocking it over and filling it with salt water from the bilge. She was appalled, but said nothing. She wished for no confrontation. He was 4 stones heavier than her and nearly 1/4 of a meter higher. She had no plan to deal with a madman. She was only concerned about protecting her child. He began to rummage through the oilskin under the small bow seat, tasting the dried fruits and cheeses, eating small bites and throwing the uneaten chunks down into the partially sodden bilge, where they floated about. She called out to him softly, "Mena, Mena, Ou, Op." She said it repeatedly, knowing the privation that would come from him destroying their food and water. He ignored her at first, then looked at her with disregard, continuing to destroy their foodstuffs. They were closer to the shore. She could see small houses on the cliff, a straw wagon drawn by a team of horses. She was not even a kilometer away. She took hope in knowing that there was some hope, rubbed her child on her head to calm her down, sinking softly, praying for a miracle. He finished stuffing himself with the food and grew more agitated. He came back ignoring the sails and ropes and swiftly picked up their terrified daughter and started shaking her till she was terrified and dropped her doll. She let go of the rudder, got up to reclaim the child, and the boat swiftly came about the gunwales perilously close to the swell that was racing in, carrying the tide to the shore. She lunged and grabbed her terrified girl while he was distracted by her angry shouts. By then, her daughter was screaming out of control. As if out of nowhere, a large wave hit them port side, pouring over the gunwales. She was standing in front of the main mast, holding on to her daughter, her grip having no purchase, and found herself tumbling head first and overboard. Instinctively, she clutched onto her daughter. She treaded water, kicked off her loose footwear coming to the surface, grateful that she was just wearing a light shift. Her daughter had instinctively held her breath underwater, waiting until they surfaced. The child was shocked and had quit crying. The boat was only a few meters away, but it was drifting farther, going beyond their reach. She looked north and she knew she could swim in. She peeled off her daughter's blanket and small coat and holding her, told her, "Hang on to Mommy's neck, we are going to the beach." She said it in her most sing-song voice. She started paddling in towards shore. Unexpectedly, she felt a sharp tug at her ankle and looked down. She was terrified. Was it a shark? Unknown to her, the husband in madness had jumped from the boat, fully clothed. Thick leather pants, boots, and a sodden woolen overcoat had pulled him under. He was struggling to surface and was pulling on her leg, determined to rise for air. The grip was preventing her from treading water and from swimming to shore, and her daughter was getting scared, her mouth barely above water, desperately trying not to swallow any water. They were both being pulled under. She turned perpendicular in the water and used her other foot to kick off his hand, clutching to her daughter in a deadly grip. She felt a crushing from her kicks. He relinquished his hold. In pain, he surfaced. Thrashing, he grabbed her arm. She pulled it back, suffering scratches, nail marks, and, using both feet, freed from the grasp, kicked him in the chest, pushing out the final air in his lungs and pushing herself away. 20 minutes later, they washed up on the beach, exhausted. She sat dazed, holding her nearly lifeless daughter in her arms. Their small craft was indistinguishable from the white cap surrounding it. She was grateful for the mercy shown to her, and she knew she would have an opportunity to raise her daughter. It did not matter to her that they had lost everything. She was grateful for life, the best gift of all. Another wife might have wondered about kicking away. Another wife might have wondered about the choices she was forced to make. The life that she had carried for 9 months, that she had held after giving birth, was the life she had to save. She had no doubts and no remorse. She looked up at the cliff, at the small winding path, knowing that she would need help. Her daughter was exhausted. She was exhausted. She stood up and took a final look at the boat. Already a small group of villagers were descending the cliff, coming to help them. Her daughter was calm. She had already forgotten their near brush with death. She sang softly as she stepped through the rocky sand to meet. She was alive. Life again was hopeful. The end. Told by Miller's wife.
The Makeover.
After skating down Lorraine Avenue all the way from West 25th to West 140th, Gloria decided she needed a cigarette. Normally, that wasn't a problem. Her aging mother not only smoked a pack a day, but supplemented her diet with Jack Daniels mixed with soda. She always poured it into an empty Coke can, figuring no one would notice. When she was younger, she was oblivious to the habit, but the level of honesty goes up among teenagers, especially when their peers say bluntly, "Gloria, don't you care your mom is a drunk?" The first time she heard it, she vigorously defended her mother. Then she came to believe the accusations. A few times she smelled the alcohol in the different Coke cans, quickly coming to her own conclusions. Anyway, their home was a run-down one-unit, aluminum siding, faded paint, dirt yard. In a rough neighborhood, it was not too far from the Lorraine Avenue Bridge, with the famous Art Deco angels watching over Cleveland. The Cuyahoga River was not much to look at, but the angels were inspirational. She was getting spring fever. She could not stay inside anymore, not in the smothering heat of late spring. Yeah, they had a fan, but one fan for 3 rooms didn't do anything except push hot air around. She had a job and was making a little money from babysitting the neighbor's brat, Tom Thumb, she called him. She watched him while the mother, Penelope, waited tables at McMurphy's Grill. She only got the assignments when her neighbor picked up the extra afternoon shifts, which, fortunately, was a few times a week. She earned $10 each, which was enough for her to actually eat and buy her skater shoes, hoodies, and a new board every now and then. She was pretty disappointed that her mom had found her stash of funds and taken all of it. She equated it with stealing. Her mom just explained that living wasn't free and she had to pay her part. They went to church a few times a month. Often her mom was inebriated, even in the early month, so they had to stay in the back, her mom wearing dark sunglasses. St. Bosco's let her go to the parochial school free, complete with uniform and books. 2 more months and she was graduating 8th grade. She was 14 years old, soon to turn 15. She was a second-year teenager. She wondered if she would be able to go to Cathedral Latin for high school. She had her doubts. Her grades were good, but not scholarship level. She liked wearing a uniform. It kept her from having to spend any real money on clothes. The skate down Lorraine Avenue took her about 40 minutes. She hopped the curbs, avoiding the fire hydrants, the ladies with the shopping carts, and the moms with the baby carriages. Finally, nearing the end of her journey, she stopped in front of the recall drugs and decided to hit up a tough-looking fellow for a smoke. "Mister, can I buy a cigarette?" she asked sweetly. "Just one. My mom doesn't care if I smoke. She drinks and doesn't really pay much attention." The man, a delivery driver for a local food supplier, was wearing his Teamster badge on his jacket. He looked her over. "Yeah." He handed her a cigarette and took out a lighter, firing one up for her. "Thanks," she said. "You get hooked on these pretty quick." "Tell me about it," he stated, coughing. "If you smoke too many, it's worse on your lungs than you can imagine. You need some money for food?" He gave her a $5 bill. "You look hungry." She looked the bill over. "Like for free? I don't have to do any weird things?" "You kiddin'?" he said. "I am union. Somebody asks you to do something weird, come down to the Union Hall on Prospect, next to the Army-Navy store. Tell us about it and we will bust a cap in the guy's head." He laughed, making a pantomime pistol shot with his fingers. "The $5, it's yours. No strings attached." She broke into a huge smile. "I left home. I had to get out. My mom was stumbling about. She was yelling about who knows what. She cut her foot on a broken bottle. Took all my babysitting money. Said I owed her." "No way for a kid to grow up. Where do you live?" "I live on 25th. Near Lorraine." "Yeah, my uncle's over there. You may have been by." He fished out a card and wrote something on the back. "Tell him Paulie said to hire you. My pops and he started Vinny's Pizza a while back. Now they have 4 restaurants. I am part owner as account of my dad dying. I just don't want to be cooped up in a kitchen. You know, I like to get out and about. He sends me a share of the profits each month. I'm saving it. You like food, right?" "Yeah," she nodded. "I like pizza a lot. I mean, I don't show it on account of I'm pretty skinny." "Well," Paulie said, looking at his watch, "I gotta finish my runs. I mean, really, but not really. My Uncle Joey, he is the head of the Teamsters. I could run someone over, drive through a building, crash every truck I drove, and never get fired. But just 'cause you can, don't mean you do. I go to church. No matter what I do here, I gotta answer for it up there. No free lunch anywhere. Gotta be cool with Jesus." Paulie grinned. "Exception for you at Vinny's. All workers get free lunches." He waved and walked off. "See you around, kid." She smoked a bit of the cigarette. Suddenly, it didn't taste too good. Her mouth got to watering. All the talking about pizza and her being near Cam's Corner had made her hungry. She looked at the sign calling to her. Hot cheese pizza. They were advertising 2 slices and a soda for $3. It was posted in the window where she could see it light up in neon. That would leave her enough to take the bus home. She entered, setting off the little bell. She took a look at her reflection in the restaurant's mirrored walls. She was unkempt. Her shirt was way too baggy and ripped. Her face and makeup were sloppy by any standard, and her black lipstick made her look like a corpse. Her jacket was an oversized army jacket. She looked across the parking lot and saw the large sign, Society Thrift, and the sign stated in large red letters sitting on an A-frame on the sidewalk. All clothes 25 cents. Suddenly, she didn't need to take the bus. What she needed was a new outfit. She ate quickly, ignoring those who were staring at her. With her stomach full, she journeyed over and went into the thrift store. The young man working at the counter looked at her like she was some kind of freak. She didn't blame him. "Can you hold my skateboard for me? The sign says I can buy like 4 items for $1. "Yep, that's the sale," he said, looking her over, shaking his head. "You know, on account of St. Patty's Day, if you like green, that whole rack over there is only 10 cents. She did the calculations. An entire new wardrobe, 20 items for $2. She picked out a green knapsack, light green button-down top with a nice plaid pair of dark green wool slacks that fit her perfectly. She went into the ladies' room to change, and in the bright light decided to wash her face. She got carried away and washed it 5 times, towel drying, removing grime, and more makeup with every wipe. She spruced up her matted hair and washed off the overwhelming black grease eye makeup. There were still traces of her black lipstick. It didn't all come off, but all that was left was a faint shadow. She decided she no longer looked like a corpse. Back on the floor, she found a cute cap and a wonderful dark green mid-sized jacket. She picked out a nearly new pair of green boots on the floor. The low-cut boots were plaid with some yellow and black in them. She thought they were pretty mod. How many green items could she find? She found a nice green headband and a belt which fit her nicely. She picked out a green waitress uniform with a pair of long green knee socks and another pair of green low-top deck boat shoes. She topped that off with a green-size small-letter band jacket with white faux leather arms that read Cathedral Latin High. She topped that off with a V-neck preppy-style sweatshirt that felt more like an Angora sweater. She kept her first outfit on and piled her other clothes on the counter. She pulled out the change from the $5 bill. She counted out $1.50. "Can you get rid of these?" She handed over the pile of old clothes. "I got 15 green items. There is $1.50. I think I will need that green outfit and account as I am getting a job." She pointed to the waitress outfit. He looked her over. "Wow, that is some kind of makeover. Where are you from?" "You go to Cathedral Latin?" he said, tucking the jacket with her other items into a large bag. "A lot of questions." She looked at his name tag. Todd the Mod. She sized up his mod hairstyle, tight-fitting jeans, and a plaid shirt. "You look like you could join the Mod Squad. Undercover agent." Todd answered, "Thanks, I'm not sure that's a compliment, though." He fidgeted, wondering what to say next. "What about you? What's your story?" "I'm in 8th grade, at St. John Bosco's." She watched him put her $1.50 in the drawer. "Maybe they will let me go to Latin." "It will have to be a scholarship. We don't have any money." "You look nice. Well, now you do," he said. He looked at her skateboard. "You rode all the way here from 25th Street? You riding home, too? On that?" he said, handing her the board. "I got about 50 cents left. Maybe I use it for the bus. I was figuring on taking the bus," she said, sizing him up. "Well, my shift ends in about 10 minutes at 4 o'clock. He pulled out a clarinet case. "You know Sampler's Music and Drums?" "Yeah, it's on 25th Street, she answered. "Why?" "Well, I need a few new reeds. I play for Lakewood High. Jazz band. We have an ensemble concert in May. I can save you the bus fare. Unless you think I'm too mod and maybe dangerous. I only have my learner's permit on account of the fact that I'm still 15, but my dad is on the Lakewood force. The cops sort of leave me alone." "Yeah, Todd the Mod," she answered, smiling, showing glossy white perfect teeth. "I would love a ride." She stepped back from the counter. "What do you think?" She did a model spin. "I think you should be in the St. Patrick's Day parade and wear a button that says, 'Kiss me, I'm Irish.' There would be a big line for sure." "Oh," she blushed. "Well, I ain't Irish, and no one is lining up to kiss me." "Don't be too sure," he answered, handing her the receipt and a bag full of her new-bought clothing. "I can tell you this, when the line starts forming, I aim to be the first one in it, even if I have to elbow somebody." "Sure," she answered, smiling. "Well, maybe this summer when I get out of 8th grade. You can come by where I work. I am just going to wait over there. The end.
The tournament.
The playground was noisier than usual. The sixth graders were challenging one another to a game called The Pit, swinging on the monkey bars across the open pit of sand with imaginary rattlers. Several had not made it and were being taunted. Greg Bales was still on the bars, then dangling over the sand pit, pretending it was full of the poisonous vipers. He wished he had tightened his belt more. His pants were beginning to droop like a federal gangbanger in prison. He was glad for once he had on clean underwear. His hands were sweating, but he was swinging for the next bar and clenching his teeth for all he was worth. He was hoping he could hold on when he made his lunge. 2 more to go and I'll be the only one, he thought. The bell had rung and everyone had left. His young friend Henry was standing close by. Come on, Greggy, you can do it. You can. Miss Caroline Rayner, the girls' soccer coach, was the most cheerful and beautiful teacher in the school. It was a big plus that she never got mad. Just then she poked her head out of the 6th grade class door and surveyed the area for any stragglers. Gregory, the bell has rung. Time's up, she announced. You need to come in. Okay, just one more. He swung, hung on, and then dropped to the sandy ground, rolling with the fall, just like he learned to do in soccer when he went up for an overhead kick or spike. He was glad Carlos Lambier, the gym coach and former star of the El Asado Bulls, a North Mexico AA team, gave him soccer tips. As he walked in, he was picturing Carlos patting him on the head, telling him that someday he would play for London United in the World Cup. He didn't care about the World Cup. He loved his coach and his school team. Carlos had become the father that he had lost during the Iraq War. His father, though, remembered locally, was listed in the papers as just another statistic. Specialist First Class Bradley Moore had been a 6-tour veteran until a suicide bomber took him out during his final Baghdad patrol duties. Gregory was saddened by the death of his dad, but there was no real closure. There had not been a funeral. Nothing much was left of him to see. They recovered his dog tags, a boot. His other body parts had been blown everywhere. The town had a memorial service, and they named the new soccer field Bradley Moore Soccer Field. Greg was secretively proud of it, but it didn't put wins on the board, and as a midfielder, he was responsible for keeping the other teams from scoring. He had to defend, pass, and look for every opportunity to help his team score, even if it meant a crazy kick over his head. He was daydreaming when he sat down. He pulled out his assignment book and watched Miss Rayner wishing that she was his mother and raising him. He had never seen anyone so beautiful, especially not his prune-faced old red-haired Aunt Betsy. He chuckled, thinking, yeah, she is as old as Betsy Ross. Good name for her. Miss Rayner was standing in front of him. Don't you want to let us know what is so funny, Gregory Moore? Yeah, he was not shy. Well, with my dad dead and everything, I was wishing I had a pretty mom like you instead of my prune-faced Aunt Betsy. She seems as old as Betsy Ross, only she doesn't sew as good. Miss Rayner was used to his rather wild statements and antics and simply turned around. Well, young man, why don't you write me a 200-word essay on why Betsy Ross is an American heroine? And if anyone else cares to keep laughing, I can find assignments for you as well. And, Mr. Moore, I sympathize with your father passing away. The best thing you can do to honor his memory is excel at life, not just in your scholastics or your sport activities, but in kindness to others. As a fellow human being and coach, I am sure Coach Lambier would agree. Everyone knew Miss Rayner had a thing for Carlos. I mean, who wouldn't? He was the boys' gym teacher. He excelled in volleyball, basketball, baseball, soccer, tennis, golf, and had no problem with going up against squads of 10 in dodgeball either. He was so fast, it was uncanny. His nickname was El Pantura. His eyebrows were thick, and his hair shoulder length and black as coal. He should have been a Telemundo star. It was a mystery to all why he settled in Douglas. Every time Miss Rayner thought about Carlos, she stopped to take a breath. He was a bit hot-headed. He coached like he lived his life, with passion. When he screamed at one of the boys, you could hear him across the field. He did not insult or disparage anyone, but he was very demanding. The boys were 15-0. Greggy was the only 6th grader on the squad. It was not because he was a special player. He was simply old enough to be in 8th grade. But with the moving around and his dad's death, he had remained at 6th grade level. She was determined to help him skip 7th grade, so he was not too far behind his peers. It was a challenging task. Their small school was in Douglas, Arizona, southern Cochise County. Most of the residents worked up at the copper smelters in Bisbee, and lots of folks were retired military and just wanted the great weather and low cost of living. It was not hard going back and forth to Agua Prieta, Sonora. Most of the border agents had children in the school. It was normal for the soccer teams from each side of the border to have at least one game every year in the other's country. They called the winning team the Campeón Gringos. 82% of the town had a Mexican-Spanish heritage. Most had relatives on both sides of the border. All the teachers were bilingual. If you weren't, it was nearly impossible to teach. Many of the first graders only knew Spanish. The Douglas residents' fear of the cartels after dropping off for a long time had recently increased considerably. Most of the smugglers had either moved to Ojai, California, or Nogales, Arizona, where they built their elaborate tunnels, bringing in both illegal immigrants and drugs. The cartels never recovered their local foothold after their extensive warehouse tunnel in Douglas was closed down. It was estimated they smuggled over $100 million in drugs and illegals through that tunnel. Now, there were periodic checks to make sure no buildings were being used for illegal entries. German shepherds and handlers were everywhere. Miss Rayner had promised Carlos she would travel to Agua Prieta that year, both as a chaperone and assistant coach. She would work with the boys, warming them up and helping them with stretching, kicking, and practice goals. If needed during the game, she would put on bandages and fix bloody noses and cuts and give out the drinks. Soccer wasn't a pretty sport. It definitely was not for wimps. She dreaded that it was Mexico's turn to host the annual contest. She was glad the girls' team never went over, and since a very recent flare and dead Mormon missionaries, that added up to longer border crossing lines. Very few parents went either. The team had a large passenger van that sat 12, donated by Bisbee Mining. That morning, they all met at the school at 8 a.m. and headed for the border, only about a quarter of a mile away. There was not much of a line to get in. Mexico had strict rules about guns and who could and could not own them. By law, they were reserved exclusively for the police and military, with maybe a few permits for ranchers or private security guards. Miss Rayner didn't care about the rules in Mexico. She wanted to come back alive with the team. She had a 13-shot Glock 9mm and an antique snub-nosed .38 that had belonged to one of her well-known distant relatives, Sheriff John Slaughter, which was her mom's maiden name. Although most would have not guessed, Slaughter was Hispanic. She knew how to use it and practiced with it frequently. Her mom had given her an inheritance early, a small ranch with 20 acres and a pretty good collection of artifacts. She had never imagined, after playing varsity soccer for the University of Arizona Wildcats and almost making the women's Olympic team, she would have ever gone back to Douglas. Her dad, an Army man, had died of Agent Orange, and her mom was still convalescing in the same hospital that evangelist and founder of Los Angeles Temple, Aimee Semple McPherson, had convalesced in during the 1930s, after a kidnapping ordeal that took her to Mexico. Her mom had worked her whole adult life at the Gadsden Hotel with its 40-foot Tiffany-style windows and handmade woodwork throughout the lobby. They were not the majority owners, but they were founders and still had a partial interest in it. It was registered as a historical building. Caroline had determined never to work there. She had received her degree in early childhood education while living in Tucson. Her time on the soccer team and practice field did not leave her much room for socializing. She was happy to be living at home. Her mom had taken a turn for the worse, and even though she went to Baptist church for both the Wednesday and Sunday services, her faith in her mom pulling through was at rock bottom. None of her prayers were being answered. She packed the 2 guns under the rear seat in the van, wrapping them in an old lead X-ray vest. She didn't tell Carlos. She had been to Mexico other times and wasn't excited about kidnapping. The story of the abduction of Aimee Semple McPherson and the attempts by her kidnappers to collect $500,000 ransom from her family had set heavy in her heart. And even though she wasn't rich by any real standards, her family wasn't poor either. The boys' team was rambunctious. A few were throwing the soccer ball back and forth. It was a short drive, but they were excited. The entrance into Mexico consisted of a few sleepy officials waving at the cars coming in and a line of people selling chiclets, blankets, tortillas, and leather goods. They had to curve down a pretty busy street. One enterprising boy had a few iguanas with their forelegs tied to prevent them from escaping, propped up for sale. Miss Rayner wasn't interested. She was content to sit towards the back near her firearms. Carlos was driving, and although he didn't take any fast knock-you-off-your-seat turns, he was not slowing down for the potholes and the poorly maintained streets. Even the stray dogs had to get out of the road quickly. He wanted to get some practice in before the tournament. The field was right at the southern part of Agua Prieta, east of the Agua Prieta River, which flowed from southern Cochise County. Because of the proximity to the dark, muddy waters, the soccer field was well maintained. Carlos thought it was at a professional level. The grass was lush and thick. There were a lot of people living south of the border who had relatives up north. The contest was a big drawing point, bringing the two towns together, and winning was a point of pride for the Agua Prieta Tigers. Consequently, there were vehicles and food vendors everywhere. There were about 400 seats surrounding the wide field, and the locker rooms, though small, were well maintained. Miss Rayner helped the kids off the bus, carried some of the snacks, and handed the big bag of soccer balls to Carlos. "I can tell you are nervous, Caroline," he said, emphasizing her name in Spanish. "You think I'm loco? The loco gringo?" she responded back. "Not so much," he added, not wanting to upset her. "Remember, I'm a citizen of El Norte. I have had quite a few family members butchered. It's not a safe place. But today, we are here. We play, we go home." He looked at her, hoping to get an agreement out of her. "I brought my guns," Miss Rayner said in a whisper. "No one will ever find them, but if you need them, they are under my seat. The bolts are just stuck in. They will pull out with your fingers. I don't want to be a cartel esclava sexual." He nodded, looking over the field, laughing. "Hopefully, we won't have to fight our way back across the border. You know who my grandfather was? You know who even my father was? If you know, then others know too, right? I could be a target." She continued making her point. "Besides, look at the missionaries that were just killed. Children and everybody. I know your mother, Senorita, until she fell sick. I stayed in the hotel many times when I was with the El Nortes. And I know you are a wonderful teacher and beautiful woman. They will not harm you unless I am dead," Carlos said, hoisting the big sports bag over his back. "Today is not my day to die. It is my day to win. Come, let's get the boys used to this rich river grass. It will more than likely bring a slower pace. Most people don't believe in a sixth sense or in alternate dimensions. Caroline did. She always got premonitions. Most people had no idea how much time she spent in prayer, Bible reading, and what she could sense and not sense. While in college, she had oftentimes changed routes while driving, avoiding horrible accidents. She had avoided dating certain people and even avoided taking classes from certain professors. There were vacations she did not go on and people she never hung out with. Many of those decisions had proven to be life-saving decisions. She placed the balls in front of the net. She assigned the practice parameters, spoke to their young goalie, and took a short walk around the field. She didn't like what she was feeling or what she saw. There were two large Chevy trucks. One was red and one was black. They both had oversized tires and were lifted, needing a small ladder to get in. They would have cost most Mexicans a lifetime of earnings. She had heard all about the recent slaughter of the nearby mayors that lived south of the town, and she was on high alert. The Mormon killers were found, but they were also known to be cartel. There had been some discussion about canceling the trip with Mr. Headley, the school principal, but he had assured her that there would be extra security at the event. She looked around, wondering where they were. It was easy for her to identify a cartel member. They had a swagger to their step. They favored large cowboy hats, bull-riding belt buckles, and their boots were made out of expensive exotic materials, like a rattlesnake skin or elephant hides, and they all had expensive silver work on their headbands, and the toes and heels of their boots as well. Most of the people would avoid gazing at them. The cartel boys all had large knives attached to their belts. and undoubtedly 38 caliber pistols manufactured in Mexico, tucked into the small of their backs or down their boots. They believed themselves to be above the law. Most cartel members bought their .45 caliber and 9mm from Army deserters, and often they purchased the FNP 90 with the 5.56 and 7.62 armor-piercing shells. Many Border Patrol officers had lost their lives even wearing bulletproof vests. It was a devastating weapon that could also shoot through an engine block, bringing any vehicle to a standing stop. It was not unusual for cartel members to go to family or sporting events. They went to bullfights, soccer games, fiestas, and circuses. Just a few weeks back, she knew that the cartel was involved with the kidnapping and torturing of reporters. They made no distinction between women, children, old people, politicians, police, or, for that matter, anyone. They shot down whoever they wished, whenever they wished. It was brutal. They were drunk on power and drunk on evil. She believed they were Satan worshippers coming to steal, kill, and destroy. She had great peripheral vision and checked out the two caballeros drinking Corona on the south side of the field. She saw the local constables and noticed they were giving them wide berth. It was common for the Mexican police to avoid confrontation whenever possible. If they hassled, shot, or arrested the wrong person, it was not unusual for their family to be taken, tortured, and killed. It was actually quite common. She edged her way over to the school van. There was nothing distinctive about it. She was glad it had no signs on the side, and it was undescriptive. Bisbee Mining is what it said in faded letters. She knew it used to haul workers from town to the mines. They were grateful for the donation. It was low-key. She opened the back door and unwrapped her 2 guns. She placed them into a small gym bag, closed the door, and walked off. She switched her phone camera on and pretended to be talking, all the while filming the men by the 4x4's rear view behind her. 2 more had joined them. They paid her no mind. The first half of the game started. Their kicker made a quick goal. She knew the next one was not going to be so easy. She looked around the stands to see where the cartel men were. They seemed to be cheering on a few of the players who were wearing extremely expensive footwear and landed a great goal. She knew the Nikes some of the Lions players were wearing had cost nearly $1,000 per pair. One of them was jostling Greggy a bit too hard. He was still able to pass it downfield for another goal. Fancy Shoes didn't know Greg as long as he had something to prove. They were coming up to halftime, and Fancy Shoes was trying to run out the clock. With blinding speed, Greggy stole the ball from him. He sent the kid flying into the ground when one of his knees took out the kid's ankles. The teammates came over, but let the boy lay for a moment, seeing if he could get up on his own. When he didn't, they got him off the field. Fancy Shoes was bleeding and crying. His mom was up in the stands, arms up, screaming. Greggy earned the team a penalty kick for being too aggressive when he slid under. He was lucky he didn't get a red card. The Agua Prieta Lions took their kick, and the score evened up at 2 each. Halftime kicked in as the other team was working on their main player, trying to wrap up his ankle. She saw the young man attended to by one of the cartel's doctors. The father pointed to Greggy, and his partner looked downfield. Caroline didn't know how they were related to the boy, but the boy was still screaming loudly, upset, and holding his leg and limping about. He wanted to get back into the game, but he was not going to be able to. More than likely, he had a broken ankle. The boy pointed to Greggy and shook his fingers with an imaginary gun. The boy's overdressed mom pulled her husband aside back towards the stands. She was dressed to the nines and carrying a small barking dog with a diamond collar. She was chewing him out for allowing their son to be hurt. Caroline didn't like the look of it one bit. She walked Carlos over to the side using her most intense facial expressions. They had a few more minutes in the halftime. The boy is from the Sonola crime family. I saw those men at the red GMC 4x4 over there. You can't miss it. It smells like money. We have to leave now. If not only Greggy is dead, but we are also. Carlos snuck a look over and saw a few other men gather around. He nodded. You have a plan? Carlos waited. Caroline shook her head. Yes. She motioned to her gym bag. I have more than a plan. Carlos put his hand on her shoulder. Okay, I will follow your lead. We are going to have to run for it, and I hope we make it to the border before we are followed. Caroline whispered, "Wait for my diversion. I will make some noise with the ref. Give me the water pail. When everyone is distracted, get them in the van." Caroline was fluent in Spanish and then some. She grew up bilingual. Most of her cousins were full-blown Mexican, and many of her uncles and aunts as well. Her maternal grandparents were native Mexican. She stormed over to the ref, midfield. She was carrying the bucket of water as if it was nothing. "No puedo ver al árbitro. Tal vez está agua. Aclara tus ojos." She said something akin to telling him he was blind. It was loud and insulting. He was shocked. She repeated it and was screaming at the top of her lungs, making as much of a scene as she could. The crowd was looking on. The referee was shocked. The call was over 10 minutes old, and a red card had not even been issued, just a penalty kick. There was nothing he could do. Mexicans did not hit their women. He was trying to get away from her. She wanted a diversion, and it was working. Everyone was looking at her. The loco gringo. She threw the pail of water at him, drenching him. The crowd erupted. Some were coming down from the stands. Then she threw the pail down. From the corner of her eye, she noticed her team was swiftly and quietly leaving the field. They were pretending they were embarrassed, but they were rushing off. She wanted to return to their benches and take the cooler full of snacks and drinks, but decided not to overdo her luck. She just followed, storming off the field. People in the stands were booing and catcalling her. She stopped and casually glanced back. She gave everyone the finger and smiled. She had caught the cartel men unaware. They were flat-footed in their response, and the kids pushed their way into the van, using both the side and the back doors. Carolina brought up the rear, slamming the tail door shut as Carlos, without waiting, put it in gear. "Slow down," she yelled as they pulled out of the parking lot. Caroline took out her .38 and shot out the tires of the large red 4x4. "Swing me by the other one." Carlos saw her motion to the big black 4x4. He pulled right up to it. She shot at its tires, putting at least 4 bullets into them. They were barely out of the field when they heard gunshots, and a tracer bullet broke their windshield, barely grazing Carlos's head. "Get down on the floorboards," he said, pushing the accelerator, spinning donuts onto the main road. They made a dash out of the field, pushing the van into the red. The cartel dudes got into the red 4x4 and found it would not turn with the left side tires shot out. They slammed the doors and headed to the Black Beast. As Carlos turned the van left down Boulevard Los Alamos, he checked his rearview mirror and realized the Black Beast must have been equipped with no flats. It was coming up quick with no listing. Not only that, but in the back of the truck, someone was standing, taking shots at them with an automatic. They crossed the river on the small bridge and headed to Hotel Plaza, turning sharply without slowing onto the avenue. It was a quick shot to the international border, barely half a mile. The Black Beast was gaining on them. People were screaming and bullets were hitting the pedestrians and shoppers, breaking windows and tearing through their van. Caroline was crouched in the rear on the floor by the rear door. It was taking on heavy fire. The young players were all down. They were covering their heads with their hands. Over their heads, the glass was exploding. The driver's barrier behind Carlos's seat was pretty substantial, double-plate steel made to hold wheelchairs. He wasn't hit, but the front windshield was shot out. Carlos slowed for a second and kicked the windshield pieces over the hood, trying to clear some visibility. Caroline raised herself up to the emergency door. She had a two-handed grip on her 9mm. She had loaded a fresh magazine. The rear steel-enforced emergency door window was shot out, giving her a clear path of fire. She stood up, aimed, and started firing. The Black Beast was only about 10 yards behind her. There had been a short lull while the shooter in the pickup bed had quickly reloaded. She stitched their windshield right to left. Every one of the 13 shots hit. The Black Beast careened off a fire hydrant into an empty notary office and exploded. The shooter was thrown into the air. Carlos kept driving. The kids got up and clapped. Carrie took both her guns, wrapped and placed them back into their protective compartment. No one would be the wiser. Carlos pulled up to the U.S. border crossing. The agent looked at him puzzled. The radiator was smoking. All the windows were blown out, and the vehicle was riddled with bullet holes making noises. "Rough trip," Carlos said, holding out his passport, smiling. These soccer games can be very contentious. Yeah, Coach Lumbier, Agent Cuvier stated, nodding at the bullet holes. Looks like they were some sore losers. Caroline came up to the front as well. You need to see my passport too, Manny? She smiled. No, Carrie, he said, winking. I'll see you at the next parent-teachers conference. Keep your head down. The end.
The proposal.
Most of the people who grew up in Edina, Minnesota, eventually moved out. It was notoriously cold, and when a young, pretty girl found out there were places that you could wear shorts nearly all year long, and instead of bundling up like an Eskimo, you could actually attract a boyfriend by wearing a cute outfit, well, they pretty much hightailed it faster than a jackrabbit running from a wolf. Emily, or Em as her friends called her, was no different from most of the girls. She spent her high school years going to Edina High School, and because of her Swedish ancestry, with its genetic disposition to blonde hair and green eyes, she carried an elegant beauty. In Edina, it didn't really set her apart or attract that much attention. The only person to ever bother to ask her out was Henry Allegard, and he was her second cousin, so she wasn't sure if it even counted as a date. Yeah, she made out with him. He stole some of his dad's small rum bottles, and they had a couple rum and cokes, but outside of passionate kissing, they didn't go much farther. Both had visions of a potentially genetically deformed two-headed baby they would be carrying for their entire life. However, the prom date was not without advantage. It was to prove to be a life-saving event for both of them. Henry had excelled at rugby and had been given a full-ride scholarship to Sumter, a small liberal arts college outside of Charleston, South Carolina. Em had not chosen her college. She was great at soccer. Her school won the state nearly every year, and often the regionals as well. It was probably because they practiced inside all year in the most remarkable indoor high school stadium complex in the world. One of the residents of Edina had invented sticky notes for 3M and donated over $100 million. Their complex allowed the baseball team, football team, the tennis club, and the soccer club to practice and play all year long. No snow days, no rainouts, nothing, just constant visits from teams all over. Her team dominated. She was first string and was naturally tall, and as the striker, she had made her fair share of goals. Her first cousin on her mom's side, Greta, was the other striker. They had played together since kindergarten and worked in tandem nearly perfectly. After the long kissing session with Henry and a few rum and cokes, which wore off quickly, they started to talk about the future. Why not? Graduation was the next week. No, Emily said. I got a few scholarship offers from Wisconsin, North Dakota, even Missoula, Montana. I am tired of being cold. I mean, really tired. I think I was destined for warmer climates. Emily rubbed her exposed arms and reached over to put her sweater on over her black bra. Henry glanced down. He was polite enough to let her get dressed without staring. Well, you can always come to Sumter. I got a full ride. Send them a video. Maybe they will let you walk on or give you a full ride too. I got a little pull with the rugby coach. Under Division III NCAA rules, they got to offer some female scholarships. You want me to check? If you weren't playing for Edina, with your skills, you would have received at least 40 offers. Yeah, I got 7, but it would mean freezing my ass off for 4 or 5 more years. I mean, dude, these eternal winters are going to be the death of me. That would be a great song title, Henry joked. Be the death of me, singing and laughing. I mean, really, Emily. I'm driving down next week to look at housing. I'm going to stay there all summer. Your parents trust you with me. We are second cousins. Yeah, Emily said. That didn't stop you from attacking me and nearly stripping me down. Henry tried to gauge how serious she was. Yeah, I just pretended for a few moments that you were both the hottest girl in Edina and we weren't related. I suspended reality. Booze can do that, you know? So that is what you think? Emily looked at him using her compact mirror to fix her lipstick. The hottest girl in Edina. Me? Get real. You kidding me, Em? Henry said. You are all the guys on the rugby and football team talk about. Everyone is just too afraid to ask you out on account of the fact that your dad is chief of police. If my dad wasn't FBI, I wouldn't have even tried to kiss you. Good one, Henry. Emily kissed him on the cheek. Well, there were a few moments there where I wished we weren't kissing cousins either, you know? Yeah, Emily said. I will go with you. I am not taking a summer job up by the lake, and my folks, they won't care. I would like to see South Carolina. I will send them my highlight reel. Well, the girls down there are beautiful, so you will fit right in. Henry reached in his pocket for some mouthwash. He gargled and spit it out the window. You want some in case your dad gives you a breathalyzer test? He's not going to test me, Henny Penny. Emily laughed. Hey, no fair. It's not Henny, it's Henry. He laughed. It was definitely a mistake taking those baby chicks to show and tell. I thought your nickname was cool, Henny Penny. Better than M. I mean, everyone works for 3M. How cool is it to be called M? Do you remember what Reverend Sorensen said Sunday during the service? That God has a plan, a destiny for us as unique as our DNA, our fingerprints, and that we were created to do good works from the foundation of the world. Yeah, Henry thought, it is true. Look at how this world works. Everyone seems to find something unique to do. Some make scientific inventions, some run governments, some farm and keep people fed, and some entertain and make people laugh. Yeah, Emily said. I know all that, but I was drilling down to my purpose. I think I'm supposed to really make a difference, not just here in the USA, where we have so much, but maybe in Africa, where they have nothing, sometimes less than nothing. Well, Sumter is a Methodist church school. I mean, it is big. Division III, thousands of students, and they do everything. Student trips to Ethiopia, Tanzania, Mozambique, and Zaire. You can go and get your own ideas. Look, Em, I'm not an expert on the Bible or everything it says, but I do know the scriptures. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened, and ask and you shall receive. If you ask God for direction, tell him you want to serve him. Love him with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself, like Jesus not only said, but did, even dying on the cross for us. Well, I am sure that is a prayer that will be answered. Let's go. They both looked over and saw a slow-moving patrol car. Henry put the car in gear and dropped Emily off. That night, Em dreamed like never before. She saw herself walking through a jungle. Her feet were tangled, and she was carrying a big machete. She had to chop herself loose with every few steps. It was exhausting. The vines were drooping down on her, and she was pushing them away from her face. She was dressed in her khakis, boots, and a tank top. Every inch of her was covered in sweat. The jungle around her was literally breathing, chirping, flapping, winds rustling, branches breaking and twisting in the wind. She decided it was time to kick her way through. She lined up and began to sidekick through every scrap of foliage. She muttered and pushed at everything seeking to hinder her forward motion. It was an overwhelming effort, but she was on fire and determined to not give up. She did not know where she was going, but she wasn't going to stay trapped. The dream finally ended. That morning, she knelt by her bed to pray. The summer season had started. The graduation ceremony had been her final stepping stone into the world of adulthood. Her dad really wasn't good at communicating with her, or with her younger brother, Brad. Her mother loved him deeply, and they shared a lot together, including respect and support. He just didn't know how to handle children. He had barked at her when she was young, even spanked her a few times, and then, feeling chastened by his anger, he had withdrawn, letting his wife do most of the disciplining. He wasn't ever mean. He spoke limited kind words to her. He just never knew what to say or how to answer a question. Their police department was in a small town. With its drunk drivers, shoplifting, occasional domestic squabbles, those were the only issues. He still ran it like it was an army base. He had been noticeably silent. He hadn't said anything about her leaving with Henry. He was there to help her carry her packs. While she was leaving, he handed her a thick envelope. He had both hands on it and was squeezing it. It was traumatic to him. "What is it, Dad?" Em said. "Your mom and I have been saving for college for a long time, Emily. Now you have a full ride. But we still want to make sure you can get a car. Nice place to live. That is $10,000 right here in the envelope. There is a prepaid credit card for $500 for the road trip, and the rest is a deposit account, plus your birth certificate, passport, transcripts, reference letters. I checked the financial institution. It has branches in Charleston, so you can withdraw whenever you like. If you want to come and visit, we will get you a plane ticket round trip. If you are not excited or planning to come back here, your mom and I will be visiting you this Christmas. It's going to break her heart to see you go. Mine too." Just then, Henry was pulling up. He was driving a large GMC 350 cargo van. There was plenty of room for her clothes, a small trunk, and other sports equipment. Henry's 4x4 and trail bike were already settled in as well, and some fairly large duffel bags. "Hi, Chief." Henry greeted him with a smile and firm handshake. He grabbed her large duffel bag and hoisted it over his shoulder. "Hi, Em. There's plenty of room for anything you want to bring. It's a pretty outdoorsy area. You should bring your bike, rollerblades, scooter. Everyone on campus rides something." "Go ahead, Em. Take a bike," her dad said. "The locks are built in with a 0829 combination. The chain is titanium hardened." "That's my birthday. The combination," Em said. "Well, it's easy to remember. It was a pretty important day to all of us. I guess this year we will have to send your present down." After loading her bike, Em said goodbye to her brother, her mom, and her dad, and looked back through the rearview mirror as they grew smaller and smaller. A tear was forming in her eye. The summer passed quickly. She got a part-time job and hung mostly with Henry. The school could not have been more welcoming. There were no sororities or fraternities, but that didn't stop her from forging great lifetime friendships. Em was paired up with a tall girl from Greenville. Her name was Joy Smith, and she was a senior on the soccer team with an older brother in divinity school. She was also black. The school was surprisingly integrated. 25% were black students from the local areas, 45% were white, and the rest were a smattering of Asian, South American, Native Americans, and international students. Sumter was owned completely by the Methodist denomination, and degrees were offered in religious studies to students from every continent. If they wished, they could graduate, ready to serve in the ministry or continue to study for a doctorate or master's, and transfer to the many associate outreach programs throughout the world. There were satellite offices in Cape Town, South Africa, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Glasgow, Scotland, Belfast, Ireland, Maputo, Mozambique, and Quito, Ecuador. They even had a large co-campus in Singapore as well as Jakarta. It was truly an international school. As such, sports like cricket, soccer, volleyball, and rugby were extremely popular, as was tennis, track, and basketball. Joy's brother Robert was in the final stages of his graduate program, about to finish his degree in ministerial studies with an emphasis on pastoral counseling. He had lost his eligibility to play any more soccer. Henry, with his wavy blonde hair and sharp Swedish features, was unbelievably popular. He was smart and quickly nicknamed the Professor. They made him team captain his first year. Pretty much unheard of, but well-deserved. Em, as his second cousin, was sought out by many of the SC debutantes, hoping it would give them an edge getting closer to him. She knew her rise in popularity and party invitations were due solely to him, but did not begrudge it one bit. She already had her eye on an older guy, so she knew how it felt to want what was pretty much out of reach. Her first class every day was in the oldest moss-covered building on campus. It was next to the century tree, an oak tree that had a 19-foot circumference. She sat up in front with many of the other freshmen. It was a required first-year class. Dr. Darren Madison was the professor. He was bumbling and rambling, but he had an honest heart, and a lot of the girls were attracted to him in somewhat of a motherly way. They brought him baked goods, books, and a few even gave him wardrobe tips, chipping in to buy him a matching shirt and pants. He was rather dysfunctional. His Christianity 101 was a transformational class. Each class started with a moment of silence, then a plea to the Almighty to make the calling and election sure for all the students. There was no doubt as to the sincerity of his message. He proudly posted photos from his multiple summer outreaches, the slums of Cairo, the bush of South Africa, the jungles and rainforest of Quito, Ecuador. It was all posted. Each photo showed Darren in the middle of everyone, smiling, hugging, and beaming with the love of God. The Holy Spirit began to work on Em's heart. She knew she was falling in love with Joy's brother, Robert. They were together so often she couldn't help herself. He was tall, with a charming face and the longest fingers she had ever seen. Daily, he played piano and led worship at the chapel services, and oftentimes delivered the sermons as well. Nobody knew the torch Em was carrying, not even Joy. Em was shocked when Robert started coming to each of their soccer games, and was even more shocked when he journeyed to Pensacola and Mobile for their out-of-town games, traveling with them on the bus. God had been working behind the scenes for her. She found out he was earning extra credits by working as the team chaplain. He wanted to spend more time with her as well. From then on, every game he was there to start them off with prayer. On the bus, he often led the singing. On the sidelines, he was encouraging, praying, and giving small playing tips to the girls. We're gonna go to the ends of the earth. We're gonna share the light and the truth. We're gonna wash up in the divine blood. We're gonna live pure truth and love. We are the chosen people, the fishers of all men. We are the chosen people from now until the end. Most of the songs she had never heard before, as he had just made them up as they drove along. The girls on the team were crazy, crazy for God and crazy for goals. No matter whom they played, they scored. They scored with headshots, overhead kicks, passes that sailed over the opponent's heads, and often miracle kicks that bounced off an opponent, then shot right between the goalposts. They earned a new name. Nobody called them the Sumter Bobcats anymore. They were renamed the Hellcats. They kicked the living hell out of every team they played. Emily didn't notice at first, but one of the other girls pointed out to her how often Robert studied her play. Not only on field was he looking her over, but during the prayer times he would often come up alongside her and hold her hand in the prayer chain. They were coming back from Cleveland, Tennessee, another winning victory. It was about a 6-hour drive. They had trounced the Church of God team by 10 goals. The headline the next day reported, "Hellcats bring the apocalypse to the Walkers." Emily was in her seat studying for her English finals, working on a practice essay. She had comfortably settled in the back of their large bus. Joy came back and sat next to her. "You know my brother is like crazy about you, don't you?" "Robert?" Emily said, sitting up and taking notice, glad they were in the back of the bus. "Keep it down, Joy. Yeah, I know, we're friends. You are my roommate. He is your brother. Nothing more." "He talks about you all the time," Joy confessed. "He wants to know about your parents, old boyfriends. I know he has sought out Henry and talked to him about you. It is like you are being selected. You know he's graduating next semester, don't you? I mean, this spring. He already has assignment in Axum, Ethiopia. He will be in charge of our entire mission facility over there." "Why would he be interested in me if he's going away?" Em stated. "Don't you see? Men are encouraged to find a life mate here at the school. Robert has been so busy he has never even looked around. Now he is looking for a girl, and he has you in his sights. He wants to meet your parents. I think he is going to ask you to the winter formal. What are you going to say?" Joy was beside herself with excitement. "What are you going to tell him?" Emily was on the spot. She thought something was up with Robert, but had no idea how extensively it had blossomed. The winter formal, it was one of the 2 college-sponsored dances each year. "Joy," Emily said, putting her hands over her wrists, "I never told you, but I'm crazy about your brother. I just thought it might be weird. After all, we are roommates, and maybe that is stepping over the line, or taking advantage of our friendship, so I have done my best to keep it on ice." "Well, girlfriend, the ice has melted and the flood is coming your way." Emily got the biggest hug. She never even saw it coming. "I am not telling your secret, girlfriend, just letting you know what is coming," Joy smiled. "Robert may be a little intellectual, a bit distant. He played a lot of sports in high school, but when he heard the call of God, he started looking at life differently. If you go out with him, your life is going to change. He's going to Africa, and more than likely, he is going to ask you to go with him. He's not looking for a girlfriend. You won't have to worry about those physical pressures. He is looking for a life partner, all in, for all of life, just like Mom and Dad are doing." "My parents too, Joy," Emily acknowledged. "Just that they are pretty much Sunday morning Christians, with regular callings. I get it. I really do. We have never even gone out, so it is sort of wild to think that he wants to spend his whole life with me." "Yeah, that is the way it used to be. Girls and guys didn't even meet. The parents arranged it, or sometimes girls just came out of West to marry someone. Love isn't always about physical attraction. It is really about kindness, commitment, and being there for one another. Look, Emily," Joy continued, "it is obvious that you have work to do. Just act surprised when he asks you to winter formal." Winter formal fell on the first weekend of the second semester. When Emily's mom, dad, and brother came out, they met many of her teachers, her teammates, and she invited them to the chapel where Joy introduced them to Robert. They exchanged pleasantries and hardly noticed how curious Robert was about them. Robert genuinely liked them and asked them to visit that Sunday when he did a post-holiday service for the local church, St. Andrew's. They had lost their pastor in a bad hunting accident. He had been gored by a deer. After church, they all went to eat at Baseball Frank. Even Henry tagged along. "That was quite the sermon," Emily's mom stated. "Many are called, few are chosen," Robert said. "Yeah, it doesn't always go over so well at a suburban church. It is a scripture you hear a lot at mission conferences. That is where I'm headed." The chief stopped eating. "You are going overseas? Where?" I have already got my assignment. I am going to Ethiopia. And well, I suppose this is a good time as any to ask. I would like your permission to court your daughter." Brad spoke up. "You want to date Emily? Aren't you older than her?" "Well, maybe older, but not necessarily wiser. She is getting straight A's. They won the national championship. I have talked to her a lot with my sister, and I traveled with them all as the team chaplain." Em's mom spoke up. "Have you asked her out ever? I have been invited to the winter formal. That would officially be our first date in about 2 weeks. We are going with other couples. Henry is taking Joy, and some of the girls from the team are going with us in a big group of 8 couples." Emily responded. "Well, Robert, I am honored you have asked," Chief said, looking at his wife, who nodded yes. "Yes, you have our permission to court our lovely daughter." Robert stopped for a moment. "I just want you to know it is not going to be easy for her being a part of an interracial marriage. I am not saying we are getting married, but if we do, there will certainly be challenges." Mom spoke up. "Don't worry about that, Robert. Worry about whether you can love each other. Be patient, kind, long-suffering, and raise children to love God. God is not looking at the color of our skin, but the love within our hearts." Henry was looking over at Joy. "Well, Joy, maybe we should head up to Greenville before we go to the winter formal. I think I should ask your dad the same question." Joy punched him in the arm. "Maybe," Joy said, shaking her head. "My dad is likely to run you off the porch with his .38. "And our mom might hit you with an iron skillet," Robert said. "You better hope that it is not hot after she has fired up her corn pones." Brad lifted his glass of sweet tea and tapped it with a spoon. "I would like to propose a toast to young love. May we all find love, and may we all stay young." All around the table, everyone laughed. They hardly noticed the cake with a candle that was being carried out to the table. The waitress set it down. Robert stood up. "Well, I have 2 things to be glad about today. It is my sister Joy's 21st birthday, which is my pleasure to celebrate with her, and I am thankful to God for bringing her the best roommate on planet Earth. Now go ahead, sis. Make a wish and blow them out." The end.
Maury the Ice Queen.
She liked being invisible. Not that she wasn't noticeable when she was present, but she was young, nondescriptive, and everyone took her for granted. She had learned like a chameleon to blend in if the kids in the neighborhood were playing games like tag and ollie ollie and free. She always won. No one could catch her if she was up to speed, even if someone was baby guarding by standing around the trunk of the tree to tag everyone. She would sneak from another direction to score. But she was not just fast, she was stealthy. If the game was played in the final moments of daylight, she was unbeatable. Her hair was the color of a crow's feather. No one knew how her black hair was always appearing bluish under light. Some thought that it reflected the color from her icy blue eyes, almost feral in appearance, but never showing any true emotion. Maury was the last of her family line, and she lived with her paternal grandmother, Ellis, in the old family farmstead on the bluffs of Lake Erie, the remnants of a once expansive grape orchard. They had settled along the banks of the Rocky River as it dumped into Lake Erie, long before lawyers, doctors, bankers, and businessmen had bought large lots and built homes to rival any of the palaces seen on the Gold Coast of Newport, Rhode Island. Her great-grandfather had owned nearly a 1-mile stretch that stretched around the whole corner. He had constructed a beautiful New England farm-style house next to the small winery overlooking the whitecaps of Lake Erie. He was one of the first growers to discover the sweetness of ice wine as he waited to harvest the multiple acres of vital grapes. He had brought the rootstock over from Ontario and took care of the orchard as if it were an elementary school full of eager students. He never grew tired of pruning, fertilizing, and even protecting his babies from an early freeze. The orchard, the land, was all gone. The land had been parceled amongst multiple family heirs. Many had become alcoholics, selling off their parcels for debt, and then dying young. Her grandmother had sold the last 3 huge parcels from her family to the Herbers, a German family consisting of a widowed dad and 3 young girls. He was the founder of the Lieber Brewery. Mr. Herber had continually pestered her grandmother to sell not only the land but also the ice wine recipe. It was well known that the Ellis Ice brand was respected. Behind the large farmhouse they lived in and the adjoining 2-story barn, there were still 6 rows of grapes. Her grandmother never grew tired of pruning them and talking about them. She put the grapes in a press and followed her grandfather's recipe and usually got about 3 small barrels of wine each year. They gave a barrel to their church for the communion celebration and kept 2 for after dinner and gifts. It was intensely sweet. "Maury," her grandmother said as she came in the house dirty as usual. "Can you bring up the barrel from the cold cellar?" Maury grabbed a handful of shelled walnuts, snacking on them. "Sure, is it for the church?" "No, I'm going to give it to Mr. Herber. I might sell him the recipe." "Graham?" Maury was indignant. "Why?" "Our remaining vines are over 80 years old. He tore down the entire remainder of the vineyard when they built the complex. I don't think he's worthy." Spoken like a true Ellis. "Come here." Grams planted a kiss on her forehead. "You are going to high school. I want you to go to St. Martin's, not the public school." "Why, Grams?" Maury answered. "What's wrong with the public school? They don't teach about God. They want everyone to believe there is no wrong or right. They even say Jesus was like everyone else, Moses, Mohammed, even Joseph Smith. They say he likely made mistakes and deserved to die on the cross. I don't want you growing up believing that. If you go to St. Martin's, they will let you pray. You will have a class about religion where you can ask questions and learn for yourself. It should be amazing, but it's expensive. Books, uniforms, bus, school activities all add up. I have enough to keep us going here at home, but not enough for extras. How much does Mr. Herber want to pay for the recipe?" Maury looked at her. $5,000 for the written instructions, and if I show him how to make it and sell him some of my rootstock for a new orchard, it could be up to $20,000. For that, girl, you could go through college. I am not going to be around forever, you know." It was settled. The Ellis recipe would be owned by the Herbers that summer. Maury, the ugly duckling, became Maury the swan. She filled out weight-wise and grew nearly 4 inches. She also attracted the attention of the Herbers' oldest girl, Jennifer. The Herbers were church-going Lutherans, and the oldest girl, Jennifer, was top cheerleader at Gutenberg Day School, a private school in downtown Cleveland that had over 1,000 students in K through 12. It was located near University Circle by the Cleveland Art Museum. The Herbers had built not only lighted tennis courts on their acreage, but a small array of spectator bleachers, a croquet and lawn badminton area, and a large sand volleyball area. They also had the largest outdoor private pool. With their father coming over a lot, learning the principles of ice wine making from Maury's grandmother, the neighbor girls warmed up considerably to Maury. Jennifer took a special liking to her. The twins, Heidi and Gretchen, almost the same age as Maury, both fought over her, wanting to be her best friend. Jennifer was in her senior year when Maury was to start St. Martin's School. And although she wasn't drop-dead gorgeous like Maury, she did well with what she was given. She tied her luxurious brunette hair into a bun with a few wisps of hair always framing her porcelain white face. Her tight tops and fashionable miniskirts showed off her muscular, solid, and somewhat curvy athletic build. And she used just the right amount of makeup to bring sensuous details to her brown eyes and rosy lips, which she always highlighted. It was her final year of cheerleading, and she was the school captain. Appearance was everything, not to impress the boys, but to be better than the other girls. Maury idolized her. She had no adults to look up to, and during that summer rehearsals for the varsity cheer team, Maury was there fetching water, Band-Aids, hairspray, dry socks, hair ties, bows, whatever they needed. The 2 younger Herbers, Gretchen and Heidi, could care less about being cheerleaders. They never left the horse barn, and they definitely did not look up to their sister. They were busy with their mares, which they managed to ride down to some of the rocky stretches of beaches. They were also fond of swimming their horses, much to the annoyance of their ever-worried father, who worried about the horses drowning and taking them with them. The only time they came around the practice field was afterwards to hang out with Maury. She was not interested in riding their horses, but was quite happy to share some of the ice wine with them and talk about their favorite local boys. It was Jennifer's idea to have a final summer cheer competition. She liked to make money. Pin money is what she called it. Maury was in charge of collecting money for the tickets and also going around town on her bicycle, putting up posters and handing out flyers. It wasn't hard. The contest poster itself was a work of art featuring a group of 3 cheerleaders in the classic cheer pose complete with blinding white enamel teeth and pom-poms. The brewery printed up 1,000 of them, placing their logo conveniently on the bottom center of the poster. The ones that were handed out or taped up were autographed and sold during the performances. Not only was Maury their new promoter, she was a stand-in flyer as well. Because she was still somewhat lightweight, she was preferred by the two girls who had to lift her. They could throw her, flip her, and she could hold a pose for as long as she needed, making it possible for the smaller bases to hold her unwaveringly. At first, she was only a stand-in, filling in for one of the girls that had to go away on a family vacation or was injured, but it was common knowledge that not only were her cheer skills legendary, but her smile and personality was as well. Jennifer was born absent of any jealous bones. Knowing young Maury was going to St. Martin's in the fall, she was already working on the Gutenberg officials to allow her to take part-time classes and get her walk-on eligibility for the team. Since her dad was a major contributor, there did not seem to be any major hurdles to her goal, which was to get Maury on the team, in spite of her not even attending school there. The Gutenberg officials were willing to give her high school athletic credits for her cheer participation and waive the attendance requirement, citing religious preferences. Jennifer had worked for hours with Maury, showing her baton skills as well, knowing they might be needed if Maury wanted to do cheer in college. Often after practice, Maury would practice the baton while Heidi and Gretchen went crazy racing their horses about. On Labor Day, the Lake Erie City Cheer Count-Off came around. The exhibition was to consist of a small bit of tumbling, a few well-executed pyramids, choreographed dance moves, and ending with a grandstanding flyer program, safe but requiring a certain level of excellence. Several of the local coaches volunteered to do the judging. Points would be awarded for all the skills and the winner would be chosen. The Gutenberg Bible girls had expanded their team to 8 members, and that meant now 2 flyers and 4 bases and 2 tumblers. Teams arrived from all over northern Ohio to watch, although it was mostly other private schools from Brandenburg, Elyria, Shaker, Gates Mills, North Ridgeville, Lorain, and Hudson who had coughed up the big entry fee. 7 teams, each paying a handsome $100 entry fee, which included 20 tickets for friends and family members. Mr. Herber had to hire valet drivers and get permission for neighbors to park up and down the nearby streets. It was costly, but well worth the effort. They must have racked in over $1,200, and they sold many extra tickets. As Maury was walking out of her grandmother's house, excited about the event, she was stopped. "Maury," Graham said, "you look beautiful. I am glad you found an activity that you really like, and I'm glad you found some real friends. Not some boy to run after and tease you, but beautiful, kind-hearted young ladies. However, I want to give you something. Come here." "What, Grandma?" Maury said, watching her grandmother take a small chain and cross out of a red velvet bag. She pulled the kinks out of the chain. "This belonged to your mom. When she passed away with your dad in their accident, you know they were able to recover all the bodies. I had the funeral director remove it for me. You were young, 3, I believe, and well, I knew someday it would mean a lot to you," she said. "I saved it. Now you are ready for it. You are a beautiful young lady." She fastened the chain around Maury's neck. Maury started to cry. Her grandmother continued, "They are in that great cloud of witnesses up in heaven, and they are watching over you. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever forget that you are beautiful. They left you that. Use that beauty for the glory of the Lord. Don't be like Lucifer, the fallen angel, who let his beauty go to his head and rebelled against God's plan. Use it as a light in this dark world." Maury walked toward the contest field, knowing that she would have to do her makeup again. All the teams were in their own little sections, wearing their own colors. It was not hard to find the bright orange and yellow banners of the Gutenberg Tigers. She was glad it was a bit of a walk, because it took her eyes a while to dry up. Jennifer ran up to her. She immediately noticed the necklace. "That's beautiful," she said. "It was my mom's. I just got it from my grandma." Maury brushed away the water. "I am such a baby. Look at me crying for a mom I never even knew." "No, you aren't, Maury," Jennifer said. "We both lost our moms. It is the hardest thing a kid can go through. That is for sure. Doesn't matter if you lost her at 3 years old or 13. Maybe it will bring us good luck. The Ridgeville Lions are here. They have 4 flyers and 8 girls on base. It's going to be hard to top them." She pointed to the biggest team under the gold and black banner. "They took state last year. What about their dismount? They flipping down or jumping down?" Maury asked, looking them over. "Why?" Jennifer gleamed at her. You don't intend to... I'm going to do what it takes to win, Jenny. Isn't that why you went to bat for me with your school? To win. To win. It is not a sin. To live, to try, and then to win, Maury said. Impressive rap. Saucy. Well, the teachers are going to like you. I got one too. The Bible girls are saucy. All our moves are dicey. Our form is just divine. You won't ever catch us crying. If you liked that dude named Luther, then you know we're not a loser. And if you try to top our act, we're just going to get you back. What you think, girl? Jennifer gave her the classic rapper pose. I think it's bomb. A Jenny bomb. Like you are bombing them. Let's go work on our routine. If I'm going to do a flip, I'm going to emphasize the landing. That could be the difference to put us on top. Her grandmother came downfield and sat in front to watch the team rehearse. They went back behind the stands and practiced a few dozen times. Maury was fearless. Without a mom or dad to always tell her to be careful, she had grown up without fear. There wasn't a tree too high to climb, a hill too steep to run, or a rock she didn't want to climb. She lived a fearless life, and it was great to see how relaxed she was with everything. Mr. Herber had taken a liking to Maury as well, and offered her grandmother some of the salami and cheese he had brought as a snack. Your granddaughter, she's a natural. Herber spoke, watching them make another pyramid. I made everyone from the brewery come, paid time off, so I guess we know who's going to get the most applause. He laughed. Grams coughed and laughed. Her mom was a swimmer and track star before she was married. I wish she had known her. Her dad skied, played college volleyball, and was a pretty avid yachtsman. Herbert took a moment to respond. I saw the pictures in the paper of the accident. 70 people died on that boat coming from London, Ontario. They were overloaded. Not enough life-saving devices. When you mix winds, waves, water, the results can be treacherous. They were 50 miles from shore. They never had a chance. I want you to know something, Grandma Ellis. You are over 90 years old. I know you are the last of the Ellis clan, except for Maury. Someday when you pass, I want you to know I'm going to look after her like my own. God forbid anything happens to you. This year, we will be sending a car for her each day to bring her to Gutenberg so she can play with the team. It will give her a few extra credits and make her a lot of friends. We Lutherans are not so different from you Baptists. We like to win. Yeah, Graham said. Except for the treatise Martin posted on the Wittenberg door. Salvation by faith and not by works. Just so long as you believe Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead, that is the most important thing. Yes, there is a wrong and a right always, but figuring out which is not always so easy. We gotta do it more with love from our hearts. God gives us that love, Herbert added. When I get the new orchard going, I'm going to make the ice wine. I will be keeping the Ellis name and logo and making sure a good percentage of the profits go to Maury. Is that all right with you? If I would have known then what I know now, I never would have cut down those vines. Thanks for keeping the legacy going. They shook hands. The Bible girls pulled off an upset and beat the Ridgeville Lions. The extra clapping helped, but Maury had practiced and perfected her double flip with a twist. It was so far above the skill level of the other teams that the crowd was speechless. The voting was unanimous. Well, Herbert's words and fears came to pass faster than anyone could expect. That winter, right after her 91st birthday, Grams passed away. Mr. Herbert had his law firm put Maury's lakeside property into a trust and designated her as 20% owner of Ellis Ice Wine's trademark, land, and all future profits. They bought a huge vineyard winery on Walker Road in Avon Lake, over 60 acres, and grafted in their grape varietal strain. It was going to be several seasons until they started producing. Maury was one of the Herbers in spirit only. She kept her Ellis name. She transferred out of St. Martin's that spring semester, after her grandmother's funeral, and converted to the Lutheran Catechism. She was the little sister to the twins, who could not stop fighting over who was spending the most time with her. Each year she got prettier and prettier until everyone convinced her to run in the Miss Ohio teen pageant. To her bag of tricks as head cheerleader for Gutenberg, she added both extreme tumbling skills and precision baton twirling. She won hands down, first capturing the title of Miss Lakewood, then bowling over the others in the Miss Cuyahoga County Fair contest, where her baton twirling skills won over both the judges and the crowd. Finally, during the Miss Ohio contest in Columbus, the state capital, she came back after suffering her first error. She slipped while doing a hands-free cartwheel. Recovered from her fall, she caught the baton and did a hands-free front jump, ending with impossibly difficult splits, bouncing back up to do a legendary twirl and bow to the judges and the crowds. The fact that she was gorgeous was just a bonus. Her smile was larger than life, and her exuberance was so intense she could have contributed megawatts to the power grid. At the Ohio pageant, Heidi and Gretchen were backstage to congratulate her with their father. There were flowers in hand and smiles everywhere. A tall, distinctive-looking gentleman approached them.
"You are Mr. Herbert, Maury's guardian, right?"
Marcel said.
"I am Marcel DeLuve, Ohio State Buckeyes band leader. Would you consider allowing your daughter to come 4 years free ride to Ohio State, and her sisters as well? Don't want to break up a good thing."
Just then, Maury came out, still sweating and shaking a bit. Mr. Herbert put the warm blanket over her and handed her the flowers.
"Maury, this is Marcel DeLuve. He wants to offer scholarships to you, Heidi, and Gretchen. You know, Mr. DeLuve, my daughters are equestrians. They both want to be veterinarians."
"I love cheerleading and baton twirling, but I would like to be running my grandfather's winery someday," Maury said, smiling at Herbert. "I'm not even sure I will even be a college performer."
"Well, we have a great school for business, agriculture, and for veterinary sciences as well. In addition, we have our own hunt team and provide board for houses if you wish to bring yours down when you attend. For you, Maury, we have always had mostly male drum majors. I think in 3 years, with a bit more training, you will be our second female one. I would like to offer you that chance and training. You will get to march in the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Chicago, New York City, the Tournament of Roses Parade in Pasadena, and the Fiesta Bowl Parade in Tempe. For the next 3 years, you would be on the cheer squad as well as on the drum major training baton squad. Tough workouts, but very much possible for a girl with your skills."
Mr. Herbert looked around and got the nod from everyone.
"You have yourself a deal, Mr. DeLuve. Come visit us in Cleveland. We can get the papers drawn up. We will all be going to the Miss Teen America Finals in Nashville. Looks like Maury is going to be one of the finalists. Well, you aren't leaving until tomorrow. Can I come by and show you some of the programs firsthand?"
Marcel added. The next day, the girls got up, excited to be visiting Ohio State, home of the famous Buckeyes. Marcel was smart. He drove up with the 2 young students, cowboys from the veterinarian program, and a tall Buckeye first-year football recruit, who was the nephew of the head coach. After a bit of chit-chat, he sent them all on their way and sat down to talk with Mr. Herbert at the faculty lounge.
"Well, you guaranteed their interest. You could not have picked a cleaner-looking bunch of young men as escorts for my girls."
Mr. Herbert lifted a glass of beer and toast.
"Talent is like cream, Mr. Herbert. It rises to the top. I recognize that team spirit is nurtured long before someone shows up at our hallowed institution. All of your daughters are quite exceptional. The only thing I wish is that you had sent Jennifer our way instead of Ohio University. You do your research. Well, she's graduating next year, so no chance for a transfer for her. She has always been a bit of a socialite, and that is the perfect place for her."
Mr. Herbert said.
"She'll be visiting us in Nashville."
Something clicked inside Maury the moment she stepped off the plane in Nashville. It wasn't the country music playing everywhere, or the miniature Red River Opry Museum at the airport, or the Elvis statue. It was the feeling in the air. Excitement. They got a place downtown on the Cumberland River. It felt to them like a small version of Cleveland, an old downtown, a bit run down with a river running right down the middle. The contest was held downtown at the Ryman Auditorium. There was a lot of blondes from every state in the Union. Maury had done her homework and realized that usually a blonde won. It was just that way. She didn't care. She did her routine flawlessly and won the talent section. Her sister fixed up her hair and her ballroom gown, and she scored well in the ballroom dancing selection, literally floating across the stage as if she were Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. She found she loved to sing with the other Midwestern girls. As she was asked to join in one of the show's opening numbers, she looked frequently at Mr. Herbert, Gretchen, and Heidi, sitting prominently down front. Unknown to her, Jennifer had driven down with some sorority friends from Athens, Ohio. She stumbled a bit in shock when she saw Jennifer and friends appear in the row next to their dad right up front. That night, they all went to a country western restaurant, Poco's Donkey, to celebrate Maury's third-place finish. They barely ate their meal, basically just picked at the fries, the chicken strips. The girls went crazy joining in the line dances, and Maury lost her heart to the music. That night back at the hotel, Jenny pulled her aside. "Well, sis, you've come a long way. I'm proud of you. I am not happy your Grams died, but I am happy you are part of my family. You've made my dad happy too, being able to take care of you. I know it took his mind off a lot of his sorrow. You never really recover from the loss of a loved one. You seem different now, sis. You excited about Ohio State?" "Yeah, I am, sis," Maury said, hugging her. "I'm just not sure I want to run a winery anymore." She was laughing. "Am I crazy? Only 17 years old with my life planned out?" "Yeah," Jennifer stated. "Look, sis, college is a good time to adjust the bridge before adulthood, and the big realities set in. But also there is something bigger. I go to some parties, not the frat parties with sorority girls. I'm not going to throw myself at some oversexed horndog teenage boys to be used and thrown away. I'm not saying I'm better than them. I just don't need to make such an obvious mistake. Love isn't found in between the sheets. It is found when we discover who we are and what God made us to be." Jenny continued, "This is my last year of cheer. It has been everything for me for like 10 years, but I was reading the Bible in church where it said, 'I know the plans I have for you to give you a future and a hope.' I understand that God has different plans for me. I am doing elementary education, maybe working with the disabled. Maybe I will be a teacher. Maybe I will be a coach. I don't know. Maybe I will be a bunch of things. All I know is God will guide my ways, and He will pick me up after every one of my failures." Maury thought for a moment. "I've been praying too, Jenny. I know what you mean about your dad. I can see the sorrow in him, but he keeps it at bay like a lion tamer. He cracks the whip and it backs off. It can devour him. I have no memory of my mom and dad. None. I was barely 3 years old. Yeah, I think I remember vaguely from photos. I can see they loved me. But my Grams raised me. And now, for the past 4 years, I am part of your whole family. I couldn't be happier. I feel like my pathway to success is my failures. Things have to fail for us to go forward. My grandma dying was hard. She couldn't be around for me. Not something she could stop. She was old, and we all die. And then your dad coming around, pretty much adopting me. Then our ice wine business closing, and your dad buying it and opening it up bigger than ever. That wouldn't have happened unless it had failed. And now, tonight, 3rd place. That is going to propel me forward too. I don't always need to win. 3rd place in all of America, sister, Jenny reminded her. But I know what you mean. God uses everything for our good if we love Him and put Him first. He won't waste a mistake. They will all turn out better results than we can ever imagine. Many thought Jesus was a failure, not throwing out the Romans, becoming king of the Jews and the entire world. Instead, dying like a criminal. People still scoff, but it was a glorious failure. He intended to die, to put off his victory until a later time. I saw your face light up when you were singing on stage. You are a performer more than I ever was. I am an athlete, but you are not just an athlete. You are a performer. You come alive on stage. When you pick your classes, study voice, acting auditions for the plays. Football season is over in January. You will have the time. And then, when you graduate, do what is in your heart. God didn't make you to be a copy, but an original. The end.
The Buttercups.
The young girl awoke from her jarring night dream. She was sweating, disoriented, and fell on the floor trying to get up. Just moments before, she was on the shoulders of her teammates, the stadium crowd cheering as she made a chest stop surrounded by girls in full yellow uniforms. She had executed a perfect bicycle kick over the head of the goalie for the winning score. Her teammates had marched her around in victorious celebration, even though she had jarred her left elbow and hip with the hard landing from 4 feet up. She woke up and was shaking off her grogginess. She knew it had been just a dream, but she had been practicing the kick multiple times each day. She had borrowed her brother's elbow pads and fashioned her own hip padding stuffing upholstery foam into an old girdle she found in her mom's room. She had fallen to the ground nearly 300 times, arching the ball to the top of the 8-foot goal. She had perfected the kick with her right foot, but she was confident that with even more practice, she could do it with her left foot as well. She wanted to be a 2-footed player. The hours of practice had earned her a sore chest and sore hips. She was glad her little brother was her biggest fan. Without his help, she would have no one to feed her the ball. She was also glad they lived close to the practice field of Mother Teresa High School in downtown Jacksonville. She stumbled blindly down the hallway to the bathroom, doing her best not to wake her father, who was snoring, or her mother silently sleeping next to him. She was light on her feet. With the door silently closed behind her, she turned on the overhead light. She was only 16 and just starting to mature as a woman. But still, her curiosity got the better of her each time she was in front of the mirror. She wanted to see what kind of changes were occurring. The last thing she wanted was for her metamorphosis from the caterpillar to a butterfly to speed up. She was grateful that she was already slim and tall. She had an early growth spurt and had run endless miles up and down steps and hills, ignoring the weather as well as the rampaging hordes of mosquitoes that spent their summer holidays in Jacksonville. Granted, she thought, running during the summer months was pretty brutal, and it surely took off a lot of pounds, but being of Irish upbringing, they had plenty of beans, potato rolls, gravy, lots of things that could help her pack on the calories, and if she wasn't careful, the pounds. No recent changes were apparent to her. The metamorphosis was slow, undetectable to her eyes. The junior prom was coming up. All her girlfriends had been snagged by some boy or other. That was all they talked about ad infinitum. Her mom was a teacher at the adjoining junior high, which shared the same building, so she grew accustomed to her mom asking, "Are you going, honey?" Her dad, in typical fashion, had avoided the subject, just adding, "Honey, if there is no one at school smart enough to ask you to the dance, don't worry about it. It is a well-known fact that high school boys are perpetually dumb anyway. I would offer to take you, but that would certainly be worse than you not going at all. You are quite welcome to take a pass. If you do, we will have a family night out at Jackson's." My dad knew that was my favorite restaurant located by the marinas. It would be a good substitute, especially if I got to have swordfish. In the bright bath light, she looked at herself again. Her blue eyes, piercing, almost wolf-like, were insightful, lupine eyes that could see not only into her own soul, but into the souls of those around her. Truth be told, she was much more interested in making the varsity soccer team than meeting Mr. Right at this stage of her life. If she didn't move up, she would be repeating her 3rd year on JV. In her mind, there could be nothing worse. She was a defensive player, a midfielder. Although her coach had encouraged her to take nearly impossible shots from midfield that entire season, the stats revealed that she had only been credited with 3 assists, 8 steals, and 1 lucky goal, which inerrantly bounced off a defender's posterior into the corner of the net. Granted, it was one of her moments of true elation, but also one that was quickly forgotten. She did not think the odds of her getting on varsity for junior year were particularly good. There were a few other juniors vying for the limited positions, and they were all good players. She had taken to getting up early, attending Mass on both Saturday and Sunday. Not only was she praying, she was lighting candles. She had no idea why God couldn't see her perfectly well without the extra candlelight, or why he couldn't hear her prayers without the exercise in pyromania, but it was an activity that helped her concentrate. Every weekend before going to the field to practice with her brother, the ball handler, she had parked her mountain bike near the convent, gone in the side of the chapel, and lit a candle, sometimes several. Her prayers were delivered kneeling, and they were precise, though a bit abbreviated. After crossing herself, she made the following declaration. "You put this desire in my heart, this passion to play. You made me fast. Without you, I am not much. I am not tearing up the academics in the classroom. Boys aren't chasing me down for my good looks. What is chasing me down is this dream not only to be super fast and a great defender, but to be a great kicker. I have been asking you this all year. Now I really need your help. Tryouts are coming, you know. There are only a few spots for juniors. I really need one to open up this opportunity for me. If I am to play college ball, I need this, God. I really need this." Her prayers were fast and effective, and then she was back at it. There was no technique she did not practice. The next school day, her few friends were gushing over lunch about their dates and how much personal interaction they would have in the back seats of the various vehicles. Much discussion was centered on what they were and were not going to let happen. She was disinterested and disengaged. Across the lunchroom was a tall, good-looking senior, a foreign exchange student from Poland, eating by himself. His command of the English language was poor. Nobody could pronounce his name, so they either left him alone or they teasingly called him Polly. It wasn't an insult. He was the striker for the varsity Marlins. She had watched him a few times during their Friday night games. They had racked up an undefeated season. They usually trounced the opposition, shutting them out, plus putting up good numbers on the scoreboard. She was slightly jealous every time he stole the ball or kicked a goal. She reasoned away that her position as outside midfielder didn't give her nearly the opportunities for goals he had, engaged in the striker position. Besides, she thought, he was 5 inches taller than her, and certainly at least 80 pounds heavier, mostly muscle. She caught him looking her way and looked around swiftly to see if she was mistaken. He smiled a toothy grin and pointed to her, nodding. She shrugged her shoulders and developed a small, self-conscious laugh. She didn't just laugh, she lit up the room. No one caught the glimpse of light and beauty that emanated from her face. At that moment, if the room were dark, she would have lit it up. He motioned her, then got up next to his cafeteria table and motioned with both of his large hands, beckoning over. She didn't know much Polish, but she knew a little. Maybe she could talk to him, she thought. Everyone imagined she was pure Irish on account of her blue eyes and blonde hair, but in reality, she was only half. Her dad's half. He was first generation. His parents were immigrants from Cork County at the southernmost tip of Ireland, home to the world-famous Blarney Stone. The O in front of her name was almost a dead giveaway of her paternal roots. Her blue eyes, inherited from her mom, had not come from Ireland as people expected, but from Warsaw. Her mom was first-generation American as well. There was not much chance for a change of the genetic pool in just one generation. Her maternal grandparents had originally traveled to Akala, where her granddad had gotten a job as a doctor. Afterward, they bought a house and started a family. Her granddad had been quite a skilled doctor. After the war, the word was they were pretty tired of being around people who had stood by in supposed ignorance, while they hauled off many of their 350,000 Jewish neighbors and countrymen, all living in about 1 square mile of area of Warsaw, nicknamed the ghetto. The Jews had been obliterated. Most had been shipped by train to Treblinka, where they died. Coming to the USA post-war was a pretty easy decision. Most of the USA was depleted of doctors. So many were casualties of the war. Her mom was a great swimmer and loved water skiing as well. It helped that they could afford a small sea ray and they weren't too far from Cypress Gardens, the water ski mecca of the world. That's really where she got the DNA, not only for her bone china white skin and aquiline features, but also her straw-colored hair and piercing blue eyes. She walked over to Polly. If athletics had taught her anything, it was not to be shy. Her mistakes and successes were visible to everyone, every day on the field. He opened his ever-present black lunchbox while she was coming over. On the side were pictures of Superman flying at supersonic speed. She stood in front of him. If he was acting awkward, it wasn't because he was shy around girls. The girls loved him. They just literally couldn't speak his language. He opened the top of his lunchbox and brought out a bouquet of buttercups. They were in a clear plastic with a yellow ribbon tying them together. "Would you go to prom with me?" he blurted out in English. She flushed. She didn't know why. Was it joy? Was it the emotional spotlight of being wanted? She broke into another one of the world's biggest smiles. They barely knew each other. She had passed him in the hallway a lot and caught him looking at her a time or two. A few times when practicing in the back school field, she saw him downfield practicing his magnificent ball handling. He had come over a few times and nodded at her when she made one of her bicycle kicks. He had laughed, not in a mocking fashion, but in amusement when she got up a bit bruised and was making a deal about shaking out her hips with exaggerated thrusting and stretching. It was ridiculous, she had agreed, but it was the only thing that took away the soreness. She took the bouquet from his outstretched hand and saw the look of puzzlement on his face. Of course, she thought, he is waiting for a response. Kochubim too, she replied, or at least she meant to. She wanted to show him that she knew some Polish. But instead of saying I would love to, she said kohamchum, which meant I love you. You love me? Polly said in heavily accented English, delivering his puzzled response to her with a huge grin. Her response was far above any modest success he could have ever hoped for. He was shrugging his shoulders a bit puzzled, waiting for clarification. She immediately realized her mistake and laughed, realizing the awkwardness. No, she said again, I would love to. She didn't try to correct herself in Polish, her first attempt having been such a stunning failure. Tak, she said, laughing. A simple yes would have been better from the start. He was pretty relieved. Yes? He answered. Tak, he smiled. Is good? He pointed at the bouquet. They are for you. I am Peter, he added, now officially on a good luck streak. You are Melissa. Beautiful Melissa with the beautiful hair, eyes. You are soon soccer star. Yes, I am Melissa. Thank you. Hopefully soon, very soon soccer star. Laughing, she smelled the bouquet and nodded to show him that she liked them. Tak, she said. My grandparents are from Warsaw. I do not speak Polish that good. No, he joked. You said you love me. Kohamchum, not so similar to Kochabimtu, which you meant, right? She was daring. Maybe I meant Kohamchum. How would you know? Come see me tomorrow night at the field. You know where I practice. I will give you my number and address. She walked off, leaving him stunned and turning red. Why not? She thought. Why wouldn't I love someone from Poland? My mom is Polish, my grandparents. Now my prom date is too. She couldn't wait to get back to the soccer field and practice her kick. She put the flowers down on the kitchen table, proudly displaying them where her mom could see them. They were a trophy to her desirableness. Her brother was oblivious to what they meant and walked by them eating a dripping peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But her mom looked over, smiled, and silently offered her a delicate flower vase, bringing it over without question, placing the buttercups in it. They are very nice, Melissa, she said, admiring the flowers and kissing her on the cheek, a daily occurrence that she never tired of. Her mom was famous for not prying. People from Eastern Europe had been taught to be quite circumspect with their comments. It wasn't that they didn't notice every detail. They just didn't question even the obvious. Her mom waited for her explanation. I'm going with Peter, the Polish exchange student. He gave them to me. I talked to him a bit in Polish, but murdered the language. Instead of just saying tak, I said, Kohamchum. Her mom found it amusing, but not enough so to laugh. Well, who knows? You might love him someday. He is terrific at soccer. I have seen him practice. He is a tremendous striker. We are the reigning state champions. Without him, I don't really think we would even be ranked. Anyway, he gave you a bouquet of buttercups. He has good taste in flowers. Why do you build me up, buttercup baby, just to let me down? You don't remember the song, honey, but it is a wonderful term of endearment. After all, our American pop music has been awful popular with people all over Eastern Europe. You should listen to the song. Your dad has the LP in the basement. He complimented you with those buttercup flowers, a compliment hidden among the obvious. She went in the basement and found the 1967 album by the Foundations. Her dad was a stereophile and had a nice collection of records. She must have dropped the needle on the song 10 times dancing around until she actually memorized the lyrics. It was intoxicating. Did a boy really like me enough to call me a buttercup? For the first time, she was unable to walk anywhere. She was officially a floater. She was traveling first class on the wings of love. She floated up the stairs from the basement and floated over to her room. She closed the door, uninterested in soccer, the varsity squad. She was smitten. She was dreaming. She thought she might even be in love. She knew God loved her. That was foundational to her very life. She had always known that. She knew her grandparents. Both sets loved her. Her mom and dad loved her. Her brother did not matter one way or another, but still he told her he loved her. In some ways, those were expected loves, like the air one breathed. But here was a young man, a non-family member, deciding he wanted to pursue her. Now that was something worth thinking about. He was going to her brother's award ceremony and was in a hurry to finish dinner. She could see he was relieved that she was asked to prom, but he wasn't going to pry. They finished the corned beef, mashers, the rolls, the hot apple pie with ice cream, and she took the soccer ball and headed out to the field. Maybe he would still be there, she thought. She was going to practice her foot skills, maybe an hour or so. She was hoping Polly was there. She never really thought that she was much to look at. Yes, she knew she had the prerequisite blonde hair and fair complexion. She knew she was attractively thin and athletic with a nice proportional face that her parents and others had always called beautiful. But she also knew she was a work in progress. It was okay by her. She wasn't planning on skating by on her looks, but on her abilities. Their town was safe overall, but every place has its aberrations. The school grounds were fenced and back a distance from the main road. Still, she usually reserved her practice to daylight hours, but since she had daydreamed the daylight hours away, she was there after dark on a field only lit up by nearby streetlights and security lights around the perimeter of the school. She had meant for Polly to come see her before dinner time, and not to be there to watch her practice. She had good peripheral vision. You have to in soccer, or you get run over, or worse, the ball is stolen from you. She heard a few car doors close and thought nothing of it. It could have been anyone. She was working on her outside stopover, a move that would get her up the field where she could nail a pass to a striker. She knew the move well, but it was her goal to make it flawless. She was combining it with her speed elastic move, something that had gotten her by her fair share of defenders, no matter what their skill level was. It wasn't hard for her. She had longer legs than most. It was one of her best and most outstanding features. Most never saw the combo coming at them. They didn't expect her to have the stretch she did. Soccer shorts are not known for showing a lot of leg. Her weapons were well hidden. She smelled them before she heard them. 3 pretty big guys. She had not seen them around, but she knew the type. Threatening, intimidating, and, with no one around, dangerous. The tallest one, who looked like an overweight Fonzie, spoke up. "We got a girl who loves balls," he said, thinking he was being funny. "Maybe we should see if she really does." A pimply-faced curly redhead said, taking a final puff of a cigarette and making it a point to spit on his fingers and put it out between them, letting it sizzle like he was some kind of superhero. She wasn't impressed. She picked up the ball and slowly backed up. She was going to dash. She doubted they could catch her. Another guy with devilish red eyes under nighttime shades put his hand out. He had already worked his way around her. She could see they were wolves, and she was the lamb they wanted to feed on. "Not so quick, Tinkerbell," Wolf sneered. It was not amusing to her. She had a short pixie haircut, low-maintenance style, and the reference was obvious. She had one card to play. "What's up, fellas? I'm just out here waiting for my boyfriend." She was trying to throw some shade on the situation. "I'm sure you've seen him play. Polly, from Warsaw. The exchange student?" "Yeah, that Polly bastard," Redman said. "The one that has all the girls Googling him like he's a movie star. Somebody should run him up a pole," Fonzie added, laughing at his idiocy. "Well, since he isn't here, maybe we should tie you to a pole, bitch," Wolf said. She spun around, dropped her shoulder, and keeping her kick low, nailed him in the meniscus. Everyone heard the crunching. She decided her best bet was taking out Fonzie next, leaving the red man for her final cup. She had never had her kick speed measured. She knew from 12 yards out, most pros could make a goal in 500 milliseconds. She also knew concussions were as prevalent in girls' soccer as they were on the boys' football teams. She was going to use that. She was a runner. She looked a bit boyish because her thighs were bigger than most men, and her calves were all muscle. She dropped the ball, got off a full kick, aiming the ball directly at Fonzie's nose. It wasn't going 80 miles per hour, but it was traveling fast. He didn't have time to duck. Everyone heard the cartilage pop. In pain, he automatically dropped to his knees, bleeding profusely, hands over his face. Nothing like a few torrents of blood to bring a bully down, she thought. Redman pulled out a small knife, not much to look at and nothing that would genuinely frighten an athlete whose blood was coursing with adrenaline. He didn't know what she was going to do. She had really practiced her slide tackle. No one ever kicked to a midfielder unless they were in big trouble or going out of bounds. If she wanted the ball, she pretty much had to steal it, hence her affinity for the slide tackle. She ran straight at him. He probably wasn't threatened. He didn't care. She weighed like 98 pounds and he was like 190. However, 6 feet out, she dropped into a slide, extended her leg, and nailed him in the ankles. Crunch! He dropped. She got up and ran to the side of the park, and needing to hop over the tall wooden fence, bounced up, hooked her left underarm on the ledge, and kicked her way over. She knew it was a move none of them could make. The fence led her back to her neighborhood. She was wearing white and did not want them seeing her, so she dirtied up her practice outfits and, ignoring the neighbor's German shepherd's incessant barking, entered the back laundry room door of their house. She knew there were fresh outfits in the laundry, so she stripped off the dirty uniform, threw it in the washer, and put on an older practice uniform and covered it up with a clean, discarded house robe. Something was dripping down her right cheek. She swabbed it with her hand and looked. It was red. She ditched into the bathroom and washed it off. She was careful to dry with toilet paper. Just then, the doorbell rang. "Get it, honey," her mom called out. She opened the door, and there was Polly. He looked insightfully at my bleeding cheek, smiling a bit grimly. "You did not wait for me?" he smiled. "Probably good. I saw some of the 10th Streeters stumbling from field. I saw you jump the fence. I must have arrived too late." "Mom," she called out. "A friend is here from school. I'm going to go outside." He was holding a soccer ball. "You dropped this." He handed it to her. "I can show you some things. Right here in your front yard. We can talk, too. You already know where I live." She took off her house robe, throwing it on her porch. The old practice uniform she was wearing was not attractive by any means. When it was off, he stared at her as if he were mesmerized, seeing her in her outfit. She saw him looking at her bleeding knee. "Yeah," she smiled. "But you should see the other guys." "I did," Polly said. "2 were limping and 1 was bleeding from his nose. I hope they have learned their lesson. They were going to their car. Maybe they will be gone for good." His statement was a bit ill-fated